Welcome to the Civic Sounds, a podcast by the American Corner Moi. Enjoy great conversations. Welcome to the Civic Sounds, a podcast by American Corner Moi, and my name is Kevin Apodo. All right, so today I want us to talk about something a bit interesting. It's interesting because it's a comparison, we are trying to compare one of the top democracies in the world to our own democratic space, that is Kenya. So we perhaps know, or you perhaps know, that the US is currently celebrating their 250th year of democracy or of independence, So we got interested and we just wanted to have a close look at, how do we compare to the US? How do we compare? Like ours is 62 years, theirs is 250. I know there are some things that we can borrow from them, and something that they can, some of the things that they can also borrow from us as well. So from history, or even from the conversations or the engagements we have with the Americans, they tell us that even them, their democratic journey has not been smooth. They've had challenges. They've had instances where they were so uncertain. What are they going to do, or what is the democratic space going to look like for them, maybe after a certain number of years. And we got curious and we said, what can we borrow from them? Because even if you look at our governance system, is a copy paste from theirs. So that therefore means there's something, or there's something that we copy from them, or we've copied from them. But something is very interesting because even if you look at our judicial system, if you look at our legislative system, our executive system, most of the times they are like giving comparison. Anytime somebody or anybody wants to make a case, they are using the United States of America as the blueprint. So I know, and you all know, that currently Kenya is going through a phase of revolution. We have a generation that is a bit awake, and they are saying, hey, let us do things a bit different. We cannot continue to do things the way our parents, our grandparents did them and did not succeed. So we have to do things a bit different. In fact, if you look at Kenya right now, we are at a point where people are a bit inquisitive. People are a bit trying to hold their leaders accountable. We are in the era of digital media. Everybody is a reporter. Everybody is reporting information. And sometimes upon verification, you realize that whatever this person reported or these people reported turns out to be true. Okay? So I want to challenge us by looking at the first thing. So the first thing, of course, is civic engagement. And I think that is a very, very critical part of the democratic process, because we cannot have a few people who know while the majority do not know. So that therefore means we need to create that awareness. We need to let the majority know that this is our system of governance. This is how we are supposed to be governed. These are the policies, the bills, and everything that we have, so that they are a bit aware. But then come to think of it, why is it that if you look closely at the United States of America, sometimes they don't act or work based on ignorance, whereas Kenya, sometimes you can see clearly that we are still acting out of ignorance? And I think I've had conversations with lawyers, and they tell me that ignorance is a criminal offense that you can be charged in a court of law for ignorance, you know. So if you try to compare the two scenarios, the United States of America and Kenya, you realize that maybe the difference is because of the awareness. Them, they are more aware, as the majority are not as aware as the minority. So how do we achieve this civic engagement or the civic awareness journey? So come to think of it, growing up, there are some things that we never used to know about governance or about political leadership. And we were in darkness until at a certain age or at a certain level where we get exposed, and then we are told this is how things work, this is what you're supposed to do, and all that. So this is my recommendation. And the recommendation is that if we can devolve civic engagement to start from the lowest level of education, that is the primary level, so that as these kids grow up, they grow up knowing very well that this is what my leader is supposed to do for me, this is what I'm supposed to do for my country. All right? So for example, one of the topics or one of the areas that I believe we need to do awareness on is on tax payment or payment of taxes. Kenyans or some Kenyans still think that paying taxes is optional, or they still think that paying taxes, they're doing it for the government. Yes, they are doing it for the government, that is true, but to a larger extent we are doing it, or you're doing it for yourself, the citizen. Why? Because that is the only way through which the government will get the revenue to sustain the services, so that when you go to a hospital, the services are there, medicine is there, drugs are there, doctors are working, if you go to school, teachers are there, services are there, and all that. So if you look at taxes or taxation, I think tax education, if we can try to devolve it and take it back to the secondary level or the high school level, for example, so that at least as these people grow up, they know that paying taxes is my responsibility, it is my obligation. And allow me to quote the immediate former president of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. He once said that in life, only two things are guaranteed. One is taxes or paying taxes, and the second one is death. So many Kenyans, or not so many Kenyans, are aware that whether you are employed or not, you pay taxes directly or indirectly to the government of Kenya. Because if you go to buy something, there is something we call value added tax, VAT. When you buy something, let's say your phone, that phone has that price already has a VAT included, so you're paying slightly more to accommodate or to cater for the VAT or the value added tax. So not so many people are aware of that. So for them, they only think that they pay taxes when it is deducted from their payroll and all that. So if we do that, if we devolve civic engagement or civic awareness, if we make it part of our daily activities, we go to church, we do civic awareness or civic engagement, we are in school, civic education is taught, we are in social gatherings, civic education continues, you'll realize that we are going to realize a lot of things, and a lot of things are going to really go on. The other thing is to embrace what we call democratic renewal. Okay? What is democratic renewal? I remember the late former Prime Minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga, used to tell us that our constitution is work in progress. So what that means is we need to view the Constitution 2010 as an unfinished product. Okay? So if we view it as an unfinished product, that means each and every day we are going to be getting recommendations on what to accommodate or to abolish from the Constitution. Okay? So that is going to be very, very important. Let us practice what we call renewed or renewing democracy. The other thing that I would also recommend is that we strengthen accountability mechanisms. So how do we ensure that we strengthen accountability mechanisms? And I want to make reference to some of the notes that I was trying to put down as I was coming here. There is something we call horizontal accountability, you know. So horizontal accountability, for example, is a scenario where we strengthen the independence of the judiciary and parliament to provide genuine checks and balances on the executive. And then we ensure that the constitutional reforms establishing a devolved government and a Bill of Rights are key steps in this direction. So we are talking about horizontal accountability. So what that means is we are not going directly to the executive. So we ensure that if we go to our courts or we go to our judicial system, we are guaranteed of getting justice. Sorry. If we look at our parliament, you know, or the legislative arm of the government, we are guaranteed that our interests are going to be represented. So we also last year, when there was that outrage of the youth, you know, when they were going to the streets, and many of the reasons as to why they were going to the streets was because of the Finance Bill 2024. So what perhaps could have caused that is because our legislative members or the legislative arm of the government was not listening to the people or to what people were saying. Perhaps they did not do their best in taking the views of the public to be able to accommodate them into that finance bill. So out of that, you saw what happened. You know, when people became outrageous, they went to the streets, lives were lost, property were destroyed, and all that. So if we ensure that our judicial system is working and the legislative arm of the government is also able to provide checks and balances to the executive, then we can achieve something very important. The other accountability method, of course, is vertical. So what does vertical accountability method mean? So this is a scenario where we demand issue-based discussions and policies from the political class or the political leaders, political parties, and moving away from populist pronouncements and cheap propaganda. So electoral systems and political parties must be strengthened to ensure that they genuinely represent the will of the people. So what does this mean? So this is where, for example, I know we are in the festive season and most of our politicians are back to their constituents or constituencies. So we are going to be meeting them in church. We are going to be meeting them in social gatherings and all that. And then sometimes we've had cases where a politician is saying something, and then there is a group that says, "Oh, hiyo ni uongo, those are lies." You see, or somebody is saying mwizi, and all that. So what we're trying to say is, as young people, we do not need to say mwizi to seek or to gain social validation. We do not need to say mwizi or uongo in order to gain maybe social media views. We need to say it because we mean it. So before I say mwizi, before I say liar, before I say anything, or before I shout at a politician or a political leader, I need to ensure that I have my facts right, so that I can challenge the leader to prove my facts right or wrong. So that is what we refer to as, or that is what we refer to, what we mean when we say vertical accountability method. We are challenging the status quo. We are telling the leaders, no, you said this, but you did the opposite. You did this, but then you're reporting the opposite. We've had cases where we have somebody, a political leader, launching a project, but then years later, this project has not even started benefiting the people or the constituents of that particular area. So what do we need to do? We go the vertical way of holding our leaders accountable. We are telling them, this is what you promised, but so far so good. 3 years, 2 years, 5 years down the line, we cannot see whatever you said or whatever you promised us being delivered. I think that way we are going to ensure that we achieve that political democracy. And for those who've been following me closely, my conversations, I usually say that we need to stop being a heckling generation. We need to stop being a shouting generation. Yes, it's good to shout, but as you shout, ensure that you're shouting with facts. Don't just shout, because the more noise we make, the more we are going to be irrelevant. So the moment we have the facts, and we are so lucky to have internet, we are so lucky to have all these documents available for us, even the policy papers, they've been made available for us by the Constitution 2010. So can we be able to fact find and fact check, so that at least we are shouting, or we are holding them accountable with facts. The last accountability method, of course, is diagonal method of holding them accountable. And what this means is that we fully leverage the vibrant civil society and free media diagonal accountability, which are very crucial for uncovering maladministration and demanding government transparency. I think Kenya, we are doing well when it comes to media freedom. I know we are not where we are supposed to be yet, but I can guarantee, or I can tell authoritatively, that Kenya, we are past an age or a period where our internet or our media can be shut down, especially during elections or whenever there is political turmoil in the country. So we are doing well, yes, but we can do better. So even to the media houses, it is your responsibility to ensure that you do your work, to ensure that you hold the government of the day accountable. And of course, with facts, not just through propaganda. I think when we do what we call intentional reporting, in media there is something we call intentional reporting. So if we do intentional reporting, then I think we can achieve a lot more in terms of our democratic spaces or democratic freedom. So that is what we call holding the government accountable, of course, diagonally. Okay, why it is diagonal? Because media houses could be owned by could be owned by maybe private sector players. Maybe it's a media house for an individual, and that is the case with most traditional media houses in Kenya. However, even though we understand that the media house is in business, but can we fact check or fact find and fact check and ensure that everything that we report is something that is aimed at holding the government of the day accountable? So as we continue with this conversation, you can see that each and every sector, each and every person has a role to play if at all we want to achieve some of the things the United States of America have achieved with their democracy. You know, it might be a long zigzag way, but if we are focused, and if each and every one of us does what is demanded of them or what is required of them constitutionally, of course within the confines of the Constitution, then we are likely to achieve that. And I think some of these things that we're talking about mostly touches on the youth. Yesterday I heard the former president Uhuru Kenyatta say that if we as young people keep saying that we are the leaders of tomorrow, then that tomorrow might never come. And we all have seen that. You know, we've had cases or seen cases where young people have lost their lives in the streets, demanding their rights, whether educational, whether economical, whether political, or even social. So meaning that if we do not pull our socks today, or if we do not act today and wait for tomorrow, then that tomorrow might never come. So the other thing is to ensure that at least we foster what we refer to as inclusivity and moderate societal divisions. So what does that mean? So what we need to do is we of course have the marginalized groups. You know, we have the marginalized communities. We have communities in Kenya that takes too long to even interact with information, you know. And this is a case in Africa. I think it's a case in Africa. For example, I once went to a certain part of Tanzania, and the people in that particular region still thought that Nyerere was the president. Same case with Kenya. There are parts of the northern eastern part of Kenya. There are some people there who still know that Moi is still the president, you know, the late former president of Kenya. So that is very, very a bit challenging, you know. So let us always try to ensure inclusivity and ensure that everybody is aware of what is going on, what needs to be done, what the Constitution says, and all that. Because if we do that, we are not going to have a generation that says, oh, I know my right. Then you challenge them to show you or to prove to you that they know their rights. Then they don't even know that. Honestly, if you ask me, the Constitution of Kenya needs to be part of the curriculum that we are giving or we are dispensing to our children in school. Why? Because Constitution guides or guards each and every one of us. Learned, unlearned, literate, semi-literate, everybody, in business, in government, employed, non-employed, everybody. So why then don't we devolve the Constitution and make it part of our curriculum or the content that we study in our curriculum. I think that will help. That is my opinion. Then the last thing that would really help us is to cultivate the culture of lifelong civic engagement. By lifelong, I mean there are people who, let's say, if they were studying history and government in school, then after some time they want to say, no, it doesn't concern me, or maybe, oh, it doesn't, hainihusu. That is what we usually say, So what we need to do is that we need to ensure that the citizen of Kenya play active role in civic awareness and civic engagement. Can we, for example, before we do anything or something as citizens, always make reference, just the same way we make reference to the Bible or the Quran, can we make reference to the Constitution of Kenya? Okay? So that we are guided by that. And all these things that I'm talking about, you'll realize that if we do them, we are going to reduce the workload or the case log in our judicial systems, because most of the cases there are out of ignorance. Somebody did something because he or she was not aware, or he or she was aware but just proceeded to do it and decided to test the Constitution. So if we are going to continue referencing the United States of America, we also have to take responsibility. It's not the role of the government to ensure that the Constitution is followed. In fact, sometimes you realize that the government benefits more from citizens not following the Constitution. Why? Because if you're taken to court, that is money you're generating for the judiciary. You see? So that is what happens. So can we emulate the United States of America, especially from that angle? I know there are so many things we need to emulate from them, but from that angle of civic engagement and that angle of democracy, so that at least we can also achieve that. I've heard people say, oh, the United States of America is overregulated. They could be overregulated, yes, but I think it's for the sake of their own citizens. It's so rare to find some of them acting in ignorance. And sometimes I admire how their systems work. For example, you're just seated here in Nairobi and the president has made an announcement in Washington, and the following day, or just in a matter of hours, that directive is being effected in the embassy right here in Nairobi. You see, that is what it means to have working systems. As opposed to some of our systems, a directive has been given, months later, that directive has not been effected. You see, that the police must be involved to ensure that a directive or a policy is working. We cannot achieve democracy or democratic freedom if we have to police everything. I think that is not the right thing for us to do, if at all we are aiming at attaining what the United States of America has attained. So it starts with me, the young person. It starts with you, the young person, the older person. It starts with you, the citizen of Kenya, to be able to know the right thing to do, the right place to do it, with the right person to do it. And if we do that, we are honestly going to achieve this. It is upon you, the political leader. It is upon you, the MCA, the member of county assembly, the woman representative, the member of parliament, the senator, the governor, the president, the deputy president, to do the right thing, so that at least we know that we are taking our country to the right direction. And we also what happened last year when there was that strategy of holding our leaders accountable. The Salamu strategy, it was worse, where leaders were being injured, some of them were being exposed and all that. So as a leader, if you just do the right thing, then we can be able to avoid all that. So that was the episode, and I hope we as Kenyans are also able to emulate the things that the United States of America have achieved democratically.